Good evening, everyone. I am going to call this regular meeting of the HERE Commission to order at 8:37 p.m. and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Khan.
I pledge allegiance to the flag. Can you hear me okay? The flag of the United States, for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Khan. Danielle, would you please call the roll?
Chair Jennings Nunez,
Present.
Vice Chair Herrera,
Present.
Commissioner Borja,
Here.
Commissioner Brenhall,
Here.
Commissioner Fitzsimmons,
Here.
Commissioner Godo,
Here.
Commissioner Khan.
Present.
Thank you, Danielle. So now on to approval of agenda order. Are there any objections to the agenda order as presented?
No.
I actually have a request, or I guess an objection to the agenda order. Is it possible to move agenda items C and D to B and C, since they're both just updates, and then we would close with our discussion of the annual work plan? I'm not sure if that should be a motion on my part, and then ask for a second, or how does that work, Matthew?
So are you looking, just for clarification, are you looking to just combine B, C, and D? Since they're since C and D are components of the work plan?
No, I'm just asking to kind of move B to our last agenda item and move up C and D.
Perfect. Then that all sounds great. If I'll just ask you to make a formal motion to make the following changes as you proposed, and then we'll move forward and we'll take the vote.
So I move that we make agenda item B our last agenda item and proceed with agenda item A, then C, D, and B as our last item. Do I have a second?
A second.
Oh, okay.
Michelle second. Michelle second.
Danielle, would you please take the vote?
Commissioner Borja,
Aye.
Commissioner Brenhall,
Aye.
Commissioner Fitzsimmons,
Excuse me. Aye.
Commissioner Khan, Commissioner Khan,
Aye.
Vice Chair Herrera,
Aye.
Chair Jennings Nunez,
Aye.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 ayes, 0 nays, and 0 abstentions.
Thank you. Matthew?
Thank you. Tonight's meeting is live streamed on cable channel 3 and our online platforms. Please email all public comments to Matthew Morales Stevens, mmoralesstevens@sgch.org, no later than the time the item is considered by the commission tonight. Comments will be read for up to 3 minutes each. Comments received after the end of the public comment section will be forwarded to the commission after the meeting. If you wish to be added to the distribution list to receive commission agendas, please email your request to mmoralesstevens@sgch.org.
Thank you, Matthew. So now is the time set aside for members of the public to address the HERE Commission on items of interest that are not on the agenda, but are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the HERE Commission. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the HERE Commission cannot answer any questions or take any action until such time as the matter may appear as an item on a future agenda. Matthew, do we have any public comments for tonight's meeting?
Thank you. We do have one public comment. And as a reminder, they are limited to 3 minutes each. So I will begin reading the public comment now. Good evening, Chairman Nunez, Vice Chairman Herrera, and Commissioners. This comment is directed to Commissioner Fitzsimmons regarding her statement at the last HERE Commission meeting. Commissioner Fitzsimmons said, "The city of San Gabriel does not have any money. We are in extreme danger of going into bankruptcy." However, City Manager Mark Lazaretto stated, "I can tell you we are not in any danger of going bankrupt anytime soon." In response to your comments regarding the San Gabriel Police Department not getting any money or compensation, in 2017/2018, the police received a 3-year contract with 4%, 1%, and 1% raises. According to Police Chief Harris, the San Gabriel Police Department has not been defunded. In fact, we were budgeted more than last year and continue to provide exceptional public services to this community. There have been no reductions in services, and in contrast to the cities you mentioned, our city council supported the police department and approved its budget along with numerous other service and safety enhancements, such as upgraded radio systems, new dispatching systems, citywide data/video integration, new police vehicles, enhanced educational incentives, and building improvements, just to name a few. Chief Harris also stated, "Though there are places with higher pay and benefits, we have not experienced any type of mass exodus, primarily due to the environment created by our city elects, executive and management staff, as well as our employees, not to mention other substantial benefits such as lifetime medical and other retirement benefits. As a small community offering lifetime medical and retirement benefits, that seems to me a pretty good incentive to stay in San Gabriel. I doubt many cities offer that. Is that what you meant by former city councils making some very poor decisions? Bringing up the city budget, police and fire departments was not appropriate for this commission. This is an issue to be brought before the council. Fear-mongering is also not appropriate without adequate information. Again, there is a time and place to discuss city budgets. The HERE Commission is not the time nor the place. Respectfully, Cheryl Cabot, Community Services Commissioner."
Thank you, Matthew.
That ends our public comments.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Matthew. We are on to agenda item number 3, which is approval of the minutes for July 27th. The time for public comment on this item is now closed. Matthew, do you have any public comments on this agenda item?
We do not.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of July 27th? They're attached to our agenda packet if you'd like to review
Yes.
them further.
My
Actually-
apologies, Chair Jennings. That was my error. It is we are approving the August 26th special meeting.
I'm
Again,
sorry.
that was my error. My apologies.
And those are attached, though, correct? Those are the correct ones that are attached. Yes. Okay. So I will correct that. And is there a motion to approve the August? Where is it again?
26th.
Oh, thank you.
I-
August 26th special meeting minutes.
Actually, Chair Jennings Nunez, I have one correction to make.
Okay.
On page 6, the second to the last item, it should read that Commissioner Goto volunteered to assist Commissioner Borja, since she's the lead on to develop the questions on the youth survey. So just need to exchange those two.
Thank you.
And with that exchange or correction, I move to approve the minutes from the August 26th meeting.
I second.
I second that.
Commissioner Borja seconds.
Is there any additional discussion? Thank you. So we have a motion by Commissioner Goto and a second by Commissioner Borja. Danielle, would you please take the vote?
Commissioner Borja,
Aye.
Commissioner Brenha,
Aye.
Commissioner Fitzsimmons,
Aye.
Commissioner Goto,
Aye.
Commissioner Khan,
Aye.
Vice Chair Herrera,
Aye.
and Chair Jennings Nunez.
Aye.
Motion passed by a vote of 7 ayes, 0 nays, and 0 abstentions.
Thank you, Danielle. So now it is time for our discussion items, and we are going to begin our evening as we have the last several meetings with a guest speaker. And I'm going to give a brief introduction, and then I'm going to ask Commissioner Brenha, who was instrumental in bringing our guest speaker here tonight, to just say a few words about him as well. So our guest speaker tonight is Bert Newton from Making Housing and Community Happen. Mr. Newton currently serves as the liaison and outreach coordinator for Making Housing and Community Happen, a local nonprofit. During his presentation, he's going to speak on rezoning religious land for affordable housing and related local and state initiatives having to do with affordable housing and housing the unhoused. So Commissioner Brenha, would you like to add to that introduction?
Yeah, I want to say that I know Bert through the church that I attend. They work closely with Making Housing and Community Happen. And he knows, he's been working in housing justice for a long time, like over 20 years, Bert? Yeah, in the San Gabriel Valley and in Pasadena specifically. And I'm really excited to hear what he has to say.
Thank you, Michelle. So Mr. Newton, before you get started, I do need to ask Matthew or to let everyone know that the time for public comment on this item is now closed. And Matthew, do we have any public comments on this discussion item?
We do not.
Thank you. So with that, Mr. Newton, we will turn over the floor to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Great. Great. So on this first slide, yeah, this is our organization. I'll first start out by telling you a little bit about who we are, Making Housing and Community Happen. We specifically, well, this tagline says what we do: educating and empowering congregations for housing justice. So we are specifically oriented toward organizing, mobilizing religious congregations for housing justice. We work with secular partners as well, but that's kind of our niche. But a lot of what I'll be talking about tonight you won't have to be a part of a faith organization or anything like that. But that is kind of where we come from, and we're based in Pasadena, and a lot of our work is very local, which is why it can be applicable to your city as well, because we do very local work. But we do work that goes beyond Pasadena as well, into LA County and across the state, and some of our educational and organizing work even goes across the nation. Next slide. So, and then click one more time. Yeah, so our recent campaigns, just want to give you an idea of 3 recent campaigns that we have done. One of them is an inclusionary ordinance. We got the first inclusionary ordinance passed about 20 years ago, which was a 15 to 20% inclusionary ordinance. And then about 2 years ago or so, we increased it to 20%. What an inclusionary ordinance, for those of you who don't know what that is, that it requires developers, when they build in our city, to set aside a certain percentage of the units, of the housing units, as affordable to moderate, low, and very low income households. It could theoretically include extremely low, but usually it doesn't, because that just wouldn't pencil out. So, so we got the first ordinance passed 20 years ago. It was a 15 to 20% ordinance, and that required developers to include in their developments 15 to 20% affordable housing, or they could pay an in lieu fee, but that fee went into a fund to build affordable housing. So over the last 20 years, about half of the developers have included the units in their developments, and the other half have paid the fee. And that fee has built a number of units. There are now several buildings in Pasadena that are 100% affordable housing built with that fee, both for sale, for home ownership and rental. So And out of that, out of the last 20 years, we've gotten about 1,100 units of affordable housing. And then so our original ordinance was 15 to 20%. A couple of years ago, we did a campaign. We showed the city. We did an analysis. We showed the city that developers can still make a very good profit, even if they do 20 to 25% affordable housing. The city chose 20%. So we got it increased to 20%. The fee almost quadrupled. So now, as of, I think it was January 2020, any developments that are approved in Pasadena now have to either have a 20% inclusionary affordable housing, or they pay a much larger fee into an affordable housing fund. And we now have other units that are in the pipeline to be built with that fund. So we also recently, about 2 years, around the same time, we got the city to agree to build 70 units of permanent supportive housing on the corner, if you know anything about Pasadena, on the corner of Orange Grove and Fair Oaks Avenue. These were 70 units for seniors who have been experiencing homelessness. And it's permanent supportive because the supportive part means they get services. So that was approved a little over 2 years ago, ground about 2.5 years ago. Ground hasn't broken yet, but that's approved. Click again one more time. And then our most recent success was convincing the city to build 112 units right in the Civic Center, right next to City Hall. So it's going to be 112 units for low-income seniors. 10% of it is going to be permanent supportive housing for seniors who've been experiencing homelessness. So, and that's going to be right in the city center. There was a lot there that has been vacant for about 100 years. Most people don't even know it's there because it's surrounded by a fence and trees and bushes. But we were able to convince the city to build 112 units. Now, both of those, the 70-unit facility and the 112-unit facility, will be the seed money for that comes from that inclusionary housing fund. So that that's going to be part of that. So one more click. Okay, so now our current campaign is to rezone church land or congregational land. Doesn't have to be churches, can be any kind of faith community. Congregational land to build affordable housing. So next slide. So what you see here, yeah, thanks, Greg. And what you see here is a church with affordable housing on it. Now, this church didn't even have extra land. They just had the space above them, but they built this affordable housing on top of them. This is not a church in Pasadena. It's not even a church in California. The church happens to be in Clarendon, Virginia. But I just like the picture because it's the most, it really illustrates what we're talking about. Although most of the developments we're talking about won't be that tall. So approximately 50 congregations in Southern California have told us that they want to build. 10 are in Pasadena. One more click. And we have a professional team that works with congregations. So we are working with about, we have in our queue 50 across Pasadena, across Southern California. Most of them are in LA County, 10 here in Pasadena where I am. And our team works with them. It's a professional team. We have affordable housing developers on it. We have a land use lawyer. We have a city planner, and we have grant funding to work with churches, faith communities. So we can do the feasibility study. We can help them write the RFP. We can help them interview developers, and this is all free service because it's grant funded. So click again. Okay, you're right. We are not the only ones doing this. There is another group in LA that does it a little differently. They're not trying to rezone, but they are working with churches independently. They have about there's a coalition of about 200 churches in LA that's doing it. So next slide. Okay, okay, great. So most congregational land is not zoned by right for multifamily housing, which means zoning has to be changed before housing is built. So this is an important point. So even though there are developments like this that have been done across the nation and in LA, most of them are either done in places where the zoning is already there, or a developer or the church spent a lot of time and money getting the zoning changed. But if we go site by site, it's going to cost a lot more time and money. And you need about 40 to 50 units for it to be feasible, for it to pencil out. So rezoning for an individual lot can delay a project for several years and add hundreds of thousands in costs. That's why we want to rezone. So we have a campaign here in Pasadena, and there's also one statewide to just rezone all the churches, and you know, so we don't have to go lot by lot. So next point, click one more time. So changing the zoning in advance or allowing the housing by right can get affordable housing built faster and make the money go further to build even more housing. That's why we want to rezone. That's why we have local campaigns and a statewide campaign to do this. So next slide. So this is the Pasadena specific campaign, just to give you an idea of how we work. If a religious congregation wishes to build affordable housing, an overlay zone, or now we're actually calling it a zoning amendment, would permit housing on any congregational property in the city, whether zoned residential, commercial, or public. This would streamline the approval process. Next point. Conditions for taking advantage of the new zoning. Next point. Okay. Developments must be 50% affordable. This is what we are proposing for Pasadena, 50% affordable. At the state level, the proposal is 100%. The reason we are doing it in Pasadena, while we're suggesting 50%, is for two reasons. One is financial, and that is that it's easier for developments to pencil out if they have some market rate in it. So more developments will get done if we include market rate. But even more important than that, the second reason we do it, even more important than that, is social integration. By including market rate units, we get more social integration. And we believe that social integration, racial, ethnic, class integration is very important, and segregation is something that's been really dividing us. And so that's actually the number one reason why we suggest that market rate units should be allowed. It doesn't mean they have to be allowed. You can do 100% affordable, but they can be allowed. It will also involve updating parking requirements. This often is a big thing. The number one, question that we come up with. But our team works with each project to look at parking options. So number 3. And the new building would complement the surrounding neighborhood. This is very important. An overlay zone, we want it to be by right so that the churches and the developers can build. No, they can't be denied, but there still will be limits on density. There needs to be some upzoning, but there still will be limits on density. That the proposal that we have given to the city of Pasadena, we have looked at each site in the city and proposed an upzoning for each site that's sensitive to the neighborhood. It is going to be upzoning, but it's going to be sensitive to the neighborhood. Each project will still have to go through design commission, so it will have to look good. The potential is to create opportunities for over 1,000 units of affordable housing. That's what we're sort of estimating. It's hard to estimate exactly how much we'll get, but we think with this one initiative, we could get 1,000 units of affordable housing. If we pass it this year or early next year, that means we think maybe within the next, 5-10 years, we can get 1,000 units of affordable housing. Next slide. So this is not, we have here, the slide says example. It's not an example of land that is built on a church site. What this is an example of is good design. Marv's Place is affordable housing. It's 100% affordable housing, in fact. This houses, I think, 19 families that were formerly homeless. That's what this building is. And nobody knows it's there unless you tell them. It blends into the neighborhood. It fits really well. Now, the developments we're talking about would be, twice the density, but they would look something like this. This gives you an idea of how they blend into the neighborhood. There was even a situation in Eagle Rock where there was a permanent supportive housing development built. So a lot of people who move into that one were formerly homeless, and the concern was not so much that it took away from the neighborhood, but it looked so good that there was actually concern that it was gentrifying the neighborhood because the look was so good. But anyway, a lot of affordable housing that's built these days is, it's really beautiful. If I had time, I could show you pictures of other places in Pasadena, 100% affordable housing developments that look really beautiful. So next slide. So this is New Life Holiness, the church on North Fair Oaks Avenue in Pasadena, a church of less than 50 people. We've been consulting with them for over a year. So we did a feasibility study with them. We helped them write an RFP. We helped them interview developers. They now have a plan. They partnered with a developer to build 52 units of affordable housing on their lot. And that would be for the community. They would not control it. That would be controlled by a nonprofit. They will get income from it. So next point. So that they will get income from the housing, and they're going to use that. So I sat in the interview with the developer, and with the developer, and I don't know exactly what they're going to get for the land, but the developer threw out a figure of $4,000 per month. So what happens is the church leases the land for the housing to be built. The church gets a income from the lease of the land. The figure that was thrown out was $4,000 a month. For the developer, that's a really good price. They would usually have to pay more. For the church of less than 50 people, that was a nice amount of money for them. When the pastor heard that figure, Pastor Othello Medla, she didn't talk about shoring up the church's finances, although I'm sure they could use it because they've been losing members because people had to move out because they can't afford to live in Pasadena anymore. I'm sure they could use the finances. She didn't talk about her own salary, which I'm sure is not substantial. She immediately started talking about the families in their church that they could help pay the rent or mortgage so they don't get gentrified out of the community. So this is a small African-American church in a historically African-American neighborhood that's been hit hard by gentrification. And they're going to build 52 units of affordable housing for the community. They won't control it. And then they're going to use the income from that to help their people stay in the community, pay their rent and mortgage. But they need the zoning changed. Right now, they're not zoned for housing at all. So that's one good example of how it can work. And we want to change the zoning for them and for the 9 other churches in Pasadena that want to build. Next slide. So click 5 more times. And 1 more. Okay. And all right, good. So we are working also with Sierra Madre, Fullerton, Yorba Linda, Gardena, and Laguna Beach. I think there may be another town at this point that we're working with. I can't remember. But we're working with each of them to create overlay zones, to change zoning for churches, congregations in their city so they can build affordable housing. And then we're also working with a state coalition that I mentioned earlier to do this across the state. The state proposal would be for 100% affordable housing. it would require 100% affordable housing. And that's because that's the feedback that coalition got from the legislators. At the state level, just to let you know how that's going, last year, it was called SB 899, and last year it passed unanimously in the Senate, but it died in committee in the Assembly because of opposition from the buildings and trade unions. But we are hopeful that there'll be we can reach a deal in the new session and we can get it passed. But it is good if local municipalities can pass their own ordinance. That way, the state could give them a carve out, and they could have one that fits them and feel like they have more local control. So next slide. So just to let you know, this is the sort of the popularity that we've encountered here in Pasadena. At a city council meeting in the fall of 2020, there were this was on the agenda, and there were 122 public comments, and from a total of 17 churches that were writing in, members of the church. Some of the comments weren't from church members, some of them were just from the general public, but I think the majority came from members of 17 churches. And next point. There was not one opposing comment. So 122 comments and not one point opposition. The public also weighed in about 100 to 1 in favor at a planning commission meeting and a planning department workshop. These were all in the fall, almost a year ago. Every time the public weighed in, it was either like 100 to 1 or 122 to nothing. And then during the housing element process that we had this winter, people kept bringing it up, just random people that, there were a lot of public forums in Pasadena around the housing element, and people kept bringing it up. It's a very, very popular initiative. We do have some, resistance here in the city government, but the majority of the council's for it. We just are, we thought we'd already have it passed by now, but we're still working on it. So that's where we are with it. And that's sort of the simple overview of our initiative and what we're doing here. And I can take questions, although if they get too technical, I'll have to refer you to our expert committee on this.
Thank you, Mr. Newton. So I will open the floor. Thank you very much for that really informative presentation. And I will say that recently I heard about a couple of Senate bills that have to do with more single-family home plots that I don't know if they are going to make your crusade a little bit easier or your goals easier. But we have a number of, it's Senate Bill 8, Senate Bill 9, and Senate Bill 10 that are quite dense. And I have to say, I'm trying to kind of read through them, but have done exactly what you seem to be trying to do on a larger scale for the churches, which is allow multi-unit development on kind of single family home plots and have changed a lot of the zoning laws to make that happen. So I'm wondering, when I look through these definitions of moderate income, low income, or affordable housing, I get a little bit concerned because your income, what's defined as moderate income in South Pass is not defined as the same thing in Boyle Heights or the same thing in San Marino, because it's based on the median income for that area. So is there a way, all of these bills initially are put forth, I'm assuming with good intentions of trying to identify and help those the most in need. But when I see what is happening around me, some of these developments really seem to target people that still require quite a significant income to live there. So are you pushing for these developments that would be at the churches to be for the very low and low income, as opposed to necessarily moderate income when you define affordable housing?
What we are suggesting is that there be, and I don't remember what the percentage is, but that the overall development has to hit a certain percentage of affordability. But it's going to, each one's going to be different because it'll depend on what the church wants to do, what they would want to see on their property, and what funding is available at the time. So they can go down to, they don't have to do just moderate, low, or very low. They can go down to extremely low. The group in Los Angeles, the churches in Los Angeles, I don't know a lot about them, but we did have a meeting with them, and they indicated that most of the ones they've done in LA are actually are permanent supportive housing. So that would be the most destitute. And that tends to be what churches want to do. I know there's one church here in Pasadena, I can say they've gone public. Most of the churches are not public, but All Saints Episcopal Church, or no, I think they just call themselves All Saints Church now. They have gone public, and I've talked with the rector there, the priest, and he says that they want to have like all different incomes, even all the way down to having beds for people who are currently homeless, like so temporary. They want to have everything. Like they want to make sure they get the most, the people who need housing the most. But the thing is, people need housing at all different levels. We have a huge homelessness crisis in LA County and in California. But by the way, the homeless, we don't know, there hasn't been a count in a year and a half because of the pandemic. But at the last count, in Pasadena, we had actually been seeing our homelessness numbers decrease for almost a decade because of the housing we're building here. And some of it has been permanent supportive housing. Now, this is, prior to this current campaign. But in this campaign, we need all kinds of housing. We need it for moderate, we need it for low, we need it for very low, we need it for extremely low, we need permanent supportive housing, we need all of that. So this could be any of that. It's whatever the church decides, whatever funding is there that is available. And in our city, because of the Inclusionary Fund, we actually have a little bit of leeway to build more permanent supportive than maybe a lot of cities do. But yeah, it could be anything.
Commissioner Brinhong?
Hi, I just saw in the grapevine that we're doing a housing element in San Gabriel. So I didn't know very much information about it, except that I was asking for comments. And I haven't actually been that involved in the housing stuff at our church either. But Bert, would you talk more about how to get involved maybe in the housing element process in our city and what questions to ask? Or, oh, okay, Mark he wants to say something. Oh, you're on mute, okay.
I'm sorry, you can finish your question, Commissioner Brinhong. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, I was just, because Bert had mentioned about involvement with the Pasadena housing, that process of housing element. So I was just wondering maybe what things you have to say about that.
I appreciate the question. I was going to jump in at the very end because Mr. Newton had brought up the housing element, and it's a great reminder or segue. We have a Planning Commission and City Council joint workshop this coming Thursday night, and would love all of you to watch and to learn about the housing element. It's our draft. We've had several sessions with the Planning Commission and with the public and trying to get some of the input to it. So this is the sort of first draft of putting the document all together. There will be another opportunity at the Planning Commission level and then at the City Council level by the time this is all done. But this coming Thursday is a great primer for the community and wanting to know what our programs are going to be. And as Mr. Newton suggested, we are looking at an inclusionary housing ordinance for San Gabriel that is being proposed to require any new development to have a certain percentage of those units to be set aside as affordable. And either they'd have to set those aside in the project or pay that in lieu fee that Mr. Newton suggested is a great way to build up a war chest, so to speak, for doing affordable housing throughout the city. So I'd love for you all to watch. It'll be on our YouTube and cable channels as our other meetings are. And feel free to call our housing department or our planning department if you have any questions after that meeting.
And now Pasadena has sent in the draft housing element to the state like a month ago, I thought. Is San Gabriel, I thought the deadline for that had passed. Is that not the case?
We have sent in our draft element. It's exactly like Pasadena. Most of the cities in the area are on the same track. The deadline is the end of October, I believe, for it to get approved. But they give you, it's sort of a soft deadline. February is the hard deadline. So we always send the draft to HCD, which the State Housing and Community Development Department, which is the department that governs this. We always send them the draft ahead of time to make sure we're not proposing something that our council and community approve to only have them turn around and not approve at the state level. So Pasadena does that, and then the other cities in the area do too. So we're on that same track.
Okay, that sounds right. And just to answer the original question from Commissioner Brennog, yeah, the housing element, for those unfamiliar with it, it's every cities in California are required to plan for housing every 8 years. And the idea is, like, how are you going to house everybody? So you have to come up with an 8-year plan. So in our, I don't know what, how it's gone in other cities, but before this year, Pasadena wasn't doing a very good job of soliciting input from the public. So we really, we made sure they did a lot of public input this year. So there was an online poll, an online questionnaire you could go and put in your comments, and several public forums. And then when it came up at city council, people weighed in. So I think the first time ever, we got huge amount of public input. And the congregational rezoning is part of that. Now, my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it's really just a plan it doesn't set anything in stone. It's a plan, and a lot of it's for what the city's going to study and look at and possibly do.
The only thing I'll add to that is, yeah, it's a plan to show how you're going to meet the programs that are required from the state. But the real teeth in the plan is a requirement to show that we have enough zoning to accommodate all of the units that were required. Every city in the state is given an allocation of units that we need to plan for. For the city of San Gabriel, it's just over 3,000 units that we have to show that there is a sufficient amount of either underutilized or vacant land. And then if there is not enough of that underutilized or vacant land that's zoned appropriately for housing, we have to then go through the exercise of rezoning that land. And the developer has to be able to come in and apply for a permit to build that unit with a minimal amount of interference from the city. The thing that Mr. Newton correctly said, that it's sort of a plan, is that we don't actually have to develop that housing. The city isn't held accountable to build all of that housing. It's up to the free market to then come in and do the building. But we as a city have to show that we have the capacity for that. So the majority of our housing, if you tune in on Thursday, is concentrated on our corridors on San Gabriel and Valley, where we have the public transportation and access to markets and shops and all of that kind of thing. So that's where the biggest concentration of it will be, in San Gabriel.
And just to let you know, for comparison, Pasadena is required, I think, to build 9,400 units, and almost 6,000 of that has to be affordable to moderate, low, and very low income.
Anyone else have any questions for Mr. Newton?
Sorry, I don't want to keep like pushing. I love that you talked a lot about all these really practical ways of advocating for housing justice and stuff. But I think a little bit we didn't kind of go over more of like the barriers to housing and the challenges that people face in attaining housing. And I think, you know, some of us know the basics, but I'm wondering if like there's a way that you can kind of like in a succinct way talk about that and ways that, you know, it's really challenging.
So the barriers that people have to obtaining housing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the first barrier is there's not enough affordable housing. I mean, that's the big barrier. I used to be a housing navigator here in Pasadena, helping people who the people I was helping had to have a mental illness, and most of them had ended up homeless. And I was a housing navigator helping people find housing, but the biggest problem was there's not enough of it. And you know, if you find, you know, one person housing means another person's not going to get it. I mean, also maybe you're also be thinking of the bureaucratic hurdles. You know, yeah, I mean, it's right now there is an unfortunate situation where when you do get affordable housing, there's always some sort of qualification you have to meet and documents you have to provide. And so those who are able to do that fastest get in, or those who have help doing that get in, but others who don't have the help or can't get it together fast enough, they get left out. So right now it's sort of a race, you know, to get into these places. The inclusionary units, and people will ask me, like, how do I get in when one of these developments gets built and they have the housing? How do you get in? And all we can tell them is, look, as soon as you see a sign go up to call somebody, call, because they're going to be inundated. I don't know how people find out, but they find out, and the units fill up fast. So the biggest barrier right now is just that there's just not enough affordable housing. There's a lot of market rate housing. The numbers that Mr. Lazaretto referred to in the housing element, they're called the RHNA targets, Regional Housing Needs Assessment. And so the state sets these goals, like how many market rate you should build, how many affordable at each category. And in the last 8 years, Pasadena way overshot its market rate units. We way surpassed that goal, but we didn't even come close to the affordable housing goals. So we hopefully in the next 8 years, we will meet and surpass our affordable housing goals. But the biggest barrier is just that there's just not enough of it. I don't know if that's what you were, I'm not sure what you were asking.
I mean, I think that's great. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Bert, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I'd like to ask a question too. So I just learned about a company called the Promise Homes. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. And they, I guess, provide, let me just, I don't want to mess up what they're about, but it's Promise Homes is committed to providing its residents with dignity in housing. We promise our residents quality housing at affordable prices, as well as financial empowerment and assistance that would position them financially. And I think it's a pretty large organization. They go ahead and they buy homes and then they rent them out, but it's for people, as they're renting them, they can own them. And it's called the Promise Homes. Do you guys partner with any type of organizations or work with outside organizations like this?
Yeah, so there, it sounds like it's one of the affordable housing developers. There are a number, the ones that have worked in Pasadena are National Community Renaissance, also called National Core. They built Marv's Place that I had on the screen. There's one called Bridge Housing that built Heritage Square North, which is all low-income senior housing. Then there's a local one that's actually established here in Pasadena over 20 years ago called Heritage Housing Partners, which builds a lot of ownership affordable housing. Those are the three, and there's some Habitat for Humanity homes here as well. Those are the three that come to mind. I'm blank. There's another major one that operates here in Pasadena. But yeah, there's a number of affordable housing developers that they know how to put the funding together, and they combine some private charitable funding with government funding. Usually that comes from low-income housing tax credits. That's usually how it comes about. There's other sources of funding too, but the low-income housing tax credits are the big source of funding. But they put that together with all the other funding that you need to put together, and so it sounds like it's one of those. I'm not familiar specifically with that one, but yeah, those are the people that actually build it and often run it.
I have a question, Ms. Newton. Are there any examples? So these homes are built on the property of churches. Are there examples in Pasadena that these homes exist? And what sort of leverage does the churches have to help their congregants or community folks?
So so this is an initiative we're trying to do to get the housing built. We haven't passed the zoning amendment yet. So in our initiative, we haven't gotten anything built yet. However, coincidentally, the largest affordable housing provider in Pasadena today is a church. It's a small African-American church, and they they have two separate developments, I think totaling like 440 or something like that units of affordable housing. It's all Section 8. So there definitely, even in our city, is a history. And Commissioner Braunag's church has 9 units of affordable housing on their property. So there are churches here that are already doing affordable housing, but they haven't done it through this zoning amendment. This will enable a lot more churches to be able to do it. There's historically there have been ways of doing it, but it's slow and hard, and this is just going to encourage more churches to do it. In general, in terms of the church's involvement, I think that was part of your question.
Yes.
So the church, the model that we're proposing is that the church partner with an affordable housing developer, because it's very, very hard for a church to be its own developer. There are churches that have done it, but it's very difficult. Most churches don't have that kind of expertise. It's very complicated. Just the funding alone is very complicated. So we suggest they partner with an affordable housing developer who will build it and then run it. And the church in return can either get money from the lease of the land or use of part of the development, depending on how they structure the agreement. So that's what we're proposing. Now, if they can work something with a nonprofit who will run services, if it's a type of housing that has services attached to them. I mean, there's different ways that churches can be involved. I know All Saints Church, the pastor there wants the community, the church community to, provide a community for the people that live there. He doesn't just want to have housing there and, ignore it. So there's different ways you can do it, but the model we're proposing mostly though is that an affordable housing developer build it and run it. And you know, but there are ways you can structure it where a church can get involved in sort of relational ministry.
Gotcha.
Wish I had a better answer, but
Thank you.
Mr. Newton, if others had more questions for you or wanted more information from Making Housing and Community Happen, or how to get involved, or is there contact information that you would be willing to have us share, or either for you personally or for the organization?
sure. I can send it to Mr. Morales Stevens, but I can tell you right now, my email is Bert, B-E-R-T, well, you see it on the screen, Bert at makinghousinghappen.org. Makinghousinghappen.org. So our organization is Making Housing and Community Happen, but the email is just makinghousinghappen.org. If you Google Making Housing and Community Happen, there are 3 different websites. The one that is a dot is the one for our organization. There's also a .net and a .com, and those, we also run those, but one's a blog and one's for a book we put out. The .org is our organization, and it's got more information than you would ever want to know. You know, it's a little bit wordy, but we're a small nonprofit, so we don't run the slickest website, but it's got a lot of information. So those are the ways you can reach me. If you want my phone number, it's 626-993-7958. 626-993-7958. You can call or text me at that one. Yeah. So.
Mr. Newton, I just want to remind you that this is being broadcast out over our city website. So as long as it is okay that the general public have your cell phone information, I just wanted to let you know that we really appreciate yourself so accessible. So thank you so much, Mr. Newton. I'm sure that we still have some questions, and hopefully we'll follow up with you or with the organization. And I know Michelle and I really appreciate you being here and sharing this kind of novel approach to trying to increase the supply of affordable housing, which, as you identified, is one of the biggest hurdles in housing justice. And so thank you so much. Commissioner Bernhoff, if you want to have the last word with Mr. Newton.
I don't feel like I really need to, but thank you so much, Bert, for being here. I feel like housing justice is very important to me. It is, when you talk about justice or equity in general, like housing is so central to just, you know, who's in the city and who's can afford to be here, you know. So thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, I guess people will reach out to you if they have any more questions and follow up.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was an honor, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. So we will be moving to our next discussion item. And if you remember at the beginning of the meeting, we are going to take it a little bit out of the agenda order. So we're going to start next with agenda item C as its label, which is the Land Acknowledgement Statement update. So our Land Acknowledgement Statement Advisory Committee members are going to provide an update on the progress that was made toward the development of a citywide land acknowledgement statement. Time for public comment on this item is now closed. Matthew, do we have any public comments on this discussion item?
We do not.
Thank you. So I don't know if Matthew would like to start, or I will start by saying that myself and Commissioner Bernhoff attended the first Land Acknowledgement Statement Committee meeting on September 14th. And Commissioner Bernhoff, if you want to jump in first, otherwise I'll give a brief. Okay, and Matthew will help me also, because Matthew is, again, one of our city staff members who is helping us with this subcommittee, or this committee. So the committee, if you remember from our last meeting, I think we stated, is composed of 2 city council liaisons. That is City Council Member Pooh and City Council Member Menchaca. They are liaisons for this committee, as well as 2 commissioners from the HERE Commission, myself and Commissioner Bringhog, and then 2 commissioners from the Historic Preservation Commission, and that is Chair Lubicic and Commissioner Maharo from that commission. And then we have 2 city staff members, Matthew, and I'm sorry, Matthew, I'm forgetting the other person.
So Danielle is our clerk.
So we had our first meeting on September 14th, where our goals were to choose the chair and the vice chair, and also to begin to discuss a purpose statement and to come up with some questions for our upcoming meeting with the tribal leaders. So our committee chair is going to be Chair Lubicic from the Historic Preservation Commission. So she's going to be the chair of this new committee, and I was elected as the vice chair. And so with that, I'm going to let Commissioner Bringhog have a moment to say something, if she'd like.
Hey, I feel like all of the information kind of went out of my head. I think we did talk about the purpose statement for, you know, what we want this land acknowledgement statement to be and to do, and kind of, you know, I think we were talking about it being more than just a statement, and like really honoring how the land and the indigenous people is kind of where, you know, it's like the history, but also continuing on and living. It's like a living relationship, and how we wanted to make sure that that was part of the way that we were communicating, not just to the tribal leaders, but also in general to everyone. And I think we were talking a little bit about the scope, as far as like, oh, do we want it to just be, you know, in like documents or read at the start of meetings? And we were talking about possibilities of having it on, you know, city buildings and maybe in schools, and partnering with just different people in the community for it to be included, at least a wider scope than what we had maybe originally thought. I don't really remember that much more.
That's excellent. And so it is very much a work in progress. I'll let Matthew, if he would like to add any more, but our first meeting was really just kind of a planning meeting. We actually did institute the idea of a work plan. So we spent most of our meeting kind of developing a work plan idea. So thank you here, Commission, for passing that idea on. And that's going to guide us as we go along. We have another meeting coming up soon. And I think that meeting is going to be with the tribal leaders, if I'm not mistaken, Matthew. And the city staff is kind of compiling a list of questions and discussion items based on our meeting from the 14th. So all that to say, kind of more to come, but we have started the process of developing this land acknowledgement statement, and kind of the overriding principle is just that we want to be inclusive of all of the indigenous people in this area, and to be respectful of how they would like us to acknowledge this land. And so keeping those 2 things in mind, we're really going to try to work closely with the tribal leaders here to guide us in our development of this. Matthew, anything else to add?
Yes. Thank you, Chair Jennings. So yes, the next Land Acknowledgement Statement Advisory Committee meeting will be hosted on October 6th at 6:30. It will be live streamed, just as the City Council meeting and commission meetings are streamed through YouTube, as well as the cable channel. And that one will not include the meetings with the tribal leaders just yet. That will be the kind of final phase of compiling the questions. It'll be the final phase of getting all of the loose ends tied up before we implement all of those meetings moving forward. So I would encourage any of the HERE Commission members or any members of the public, if there's any items that you think are important to be included as those questions are being developed, or things that the committee should consider when they are having these discussions, that would be before the next meeting would be the best time to voice those concerns or those questions or those thoughts before those meetings occur. But otherwise, I'm always available. If anyone has any further questions on the subject, or if anyone wants to send items directly to me via email, I can share those with the committee members as well.
Thank you, Matthew. And then just the last thing on this item is that there is on the city website, under the Planning Division tab, there is a section on the land acknowledgement statement, like updates, and I think there's also information on how to kind of provide your input on this whole area as well. So that was created especially for this committee. Check that. Thank you. If there isn't anything else, then we can go on to agenda item D, which is the agenda translation update. Our city manager, Mark Lazaretto, is going to provide an update to the commission on the translation of city council and here commission meeting agendas from English to Spanish, Chinese, and Vietnamese. The time for public comment on this item is now closed. Matthew, do we have any public comments on this discussion item?
We do not.
Thank you. Turn it over to Mark Lazaretto.
Thank you, Chair Jennings. This will be very brief. But as promised, we took the request to the City Council on the September 7th meeting to get direction to translate the agendas, as Chair Jennings mentioned, into Chinese, Vietnamese, and Spanish. And the City Council approved that request, as well as the budget necessary to do that for the rest of this fiscal year. So as of last meeting, believe it or not, as of the September 21st meeting for the City Council, we started translating those agendas. We had a couple of hiccups in our first time, but we're able to get them up on Monday morning for the Tuesday meeting. But we will be doing it from here on out, if at all possible, by Friday, so that folks who don't speak English as their first or their preferred language, they can check on a Friday before our Tuesday meetings in order to find those agendas in traditional Chinese, Spanish, and Vietnamese. And we've also translated the Here Commission agendas as well. So tonight's meeting, the agendas were posted in those 3 languages as well. So if you hear any questions or concerns from the public, we'd love to hear about those. We are, again, trying to work those bugs out, but we feel like it's a step in the right direction, and we'll do this for the next several months and then see what comes from that. Any questions from anybody on the commission or concerns about that?
Hey, Mark, this is George. I saw the translations today. My wife was on the website and she showed me, she was all excited. So great job on that. Was that through Google Translate? Through I believe I heard this happening that we were going to do some kind of Google Translate the last city meeting. Was this through Google Translate, or how was this done? Or did somebody physically? Go for it.
Oh, good. I'm sorry. That's a great question. And no, it is not through Google Translate. We use an outside service, and we will do it for all the other meetings, but we had it translated professionally, and then we have staff in-house that can then read it just to make sure it says what we think it says. But they were pretty darn close. What we talked about at the council meeting relating to Google Translate, first of all, one of the options was to not pay for it and to just use the Google Translate feature through Chrome. But we decided that we would professionally translate into those 3 languages for the Here Commission and the City Council meeting. But for our other agendas, we will put that Google Translate button or feature, whatever you want to call it, on those web pages so folks can use that feature to translate those agendas into other languages. And for our Here Commission and Council meetings, we will still have that Google Translate feature available for folks who want languages other than the 3 that we are translating.
Oh, that's definitely a step forward. That's great. Great to hear that. That's awesome. Great job, San Gabriel. So one thing that I did notice from when my wife went into the website and she was looking up the agenda, it populated, but for whatever reason, it populated for her traditional Chinese. I haven't checked on my computer, but I'm not quite sure why it did that. Maybe that's a bug that we need to look into, but I think it should be, the default should be English.
We have three, thank you for the comment. We have the three different agendas, actually 4 different agendas. So I think I know where you're talking about. When you click on the most recent agenda, it will go to the one that we uploaded last, but you're right. We should default that always to the English translation. And I know exactly what you're talking about. It happened to me one time as well. So we'll look into that and we'll make sure that that does that. But when you go to view all agendas, it'll show you a list of all the agendas. That's
right. And then we did that and we went to view all, and it gave you all the options: traditional, Vietnamese, Spanish, and English. Yes. Thanks, Mark.
Right.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for pointing that out.
Good.
Thank you, Mark, for that update. That is a good first step, because we know this is going to be a continuation and a work in progress, but it is, as Vice Chair Herrera said, a really great step in our goal to be more accessible and more inclusive in city government. So thank you for helping us make that happen. So now on to our agenda item, which is listed as B, discussion of the annual work plan and action plan. This annual work plan, if you remember, was approved with amendments at the June 15th City Council meeting. Commissioners, tonight we will continue to discuss the progress made on each item. The primary items for discussion include items number 2, which is community engagement, number 3, no, I'm sorry, Matthew, you might have to tell us community items 2, 3, 5, and 7, community engagement, youth engagement, accessibility, and data collection. So the time for public comment on this item is now closed. Matthew, do we have any comments on this discussion item?
We do not.
Thank you. So we can start with, well, I just want to give a little update in terms of community engagement, which is item number 2. That we have successfully completed a number of our kind of goals in terms of community engagement with our guest speakers each month. And as Matthew said at our last meeting, we do have a guest speaker lined up for October, and I think for November also. So Matthew, maybe you can let us know about our October and November guest speakers.
Sure. So we tentatively have the San Gabriel Met team scheduled for October. I know that they're extremely busy, so I'm just waiting on confirmation there. I'll follow up later this week as well. And then November, we had tentatively scheduled a space open for a tribal leader to come out and provide a presentation. But I believe if that's not possible, I think the celebration, and I'm sure Chair Jennings, you'll go into this a little bit further, that the celebration that the HERE Commission would be putting together would be a more than sufficient supplement for that as well.
Okay. So staying on community engagement, Commissioner Khan and I did have a meeting with Chief Anthony Morales of the Gabrielino Tongva Band of Mission Indians, I want to get that correct, about a week ago to discuss the Native American Heritage Month celebration here in San Gabriel. And as part of your agenda items, I did just include a brief summary of kind of how the Native American Heritage Month began to be celebrated in the United States. It is something that, you know, has evolved just like Black History Month and Hispanic Heritage Month, which we are currently in right now. So you can read through that, but Commissioner Khan, would you like to say anything about our meeting with Chief Anthony Morales?
Well, I think the meeting went very well, and he was receptive to the ideas of the display and the library, and himself coming and speaking in person if there was an opportunity. And I think that he wanted to continue, so he was pretty receptive to continue continuing to sort of participate. And he was appreciative of the recognition that he was able to receive. And I think it's a work in progress again, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. Yes, so we met with him, and as of right now, our goal is that to have a city proclamation, which he is very excited about, and we are going to develop that, and we're going to provide it to the tribal leaders. Hopefully, both tribal leaders are provided for their input before it is actually made official by our city council. So a proclamation. We've also spoken to the San Gabriel Library, so the Los Angeles Public Library System, and the current staff at the San Gabriel Library is very excited to create a display for Native American Heritage Month. And in addition, they're going to develop a couple of story times, children's story times, with stories that highlight Native American heritage or by Native American authors. And they're actually going to work on an adult author, program as well. So they're going to be partnering with us with this initiative. And then the other area that we're going to work on is to either do, I'm sorry, I'm just blanking now. I'm trying to pull up the email.
If I may step in briefly. So one of the elements, one of the items that Chief Morales brought up is the concern over the Delta variant and its impact on his community and of course the community at large. So refraining from in-person events, which is completely understandable. And that falls in alignment with what we're doing with our community services events, kind of transitioning them to a modified version of what we've offered in the past. So to that end, the city staff will be working on a video that will get displayed on the city's YouTube video channel. I've met with staff on Monday. The two staff, our senior rec leaders who have worked on our videos like the Lunar, as well as our youth programming, and they do a fantastic job of really highlighting whatever it is that we're trying to highlight at that time. And they're already committed to doing as much research as they can on the Native American heritage, making sure that there's ample time for the local tribes to review the video, as well as just making sure that it's providing information in a thoughtful and considerate manner. So the Chair Jennings, as well as Commissioner Khan and the tribal leaders will have ample time to review that, provide input, and then make some edits. So I think that's, again, what would be the potential placement in lieu of a speaker if indeed we aren't able to get a speaker for the November meeting. So, and I'll turn it back over to Chair Jennings.
No, and that was excellent. So the proclamation, our library display, our video that will be promoted on social media throughout the city. And Chief Morales was very excited about the possibility in coming years of having an in-person event where we would have tribal dancers and education and something that is much larger in the future. So it was a really great meeting, and I appreciate all that Matthew did to put that together and that he's continuing to do. So thank you very much, Matthew. Thank you, Commissioner Khan. So those are our two areas in terms of community engagement. I think we've done a lot. So moving on to the next area, youth engagement, where we've also done a lot. So Commissioner Goto and Commissioner Borja are going to give us updates in those areas.
Sorry, before we move forward, I have a question. Can we just address that? Since the Heritage Month is November, if we're going to work with the library, are you or us going to meet with them in person, or are we just going to let them do their own display of the program?
So I've already spoken with them, and so similar to what they did for Juneteenth, their librarians are going to be responsible for that, and they'll be choosing the material and developing this display. They did a really great job for Juneteenth, and I'm sure that they will do the same for this.
So does your commission has any part in it in terms of input or sort of attending or anything at all, or it's just that they're going to do it themselves?
The librarians and staff did say that if I can provide their email contact information if we have any suggestions for authors or, that they were happy to consider it. So
Okay.
if you have anything that you would like to provide in terms of input, or any of the other commissioners do as well, then Matthew can provide their contact information for you.
So I just wanted to find out whether we have anything, whether we need to do anything in that aspect, I mean, that part of the program.
No.
Okay.
As Chair Jennings said, the library staff do a phenomenal job kind of curating a collection of books and a display that represents kind of what the goal of that celebration is. And if you had a chance to look at the Juneteenth display that Chair Jennings worked on with the library, it's fantastic. It's right when you walk in the rear entrance. You can't miss it. So it's not pushed off to the side. It's not an afterthought. It really is at the forefront, and really shows that the library has a commitment to celebrating this Heritage Month as well.
So if you're making a video, and that would be a part of that video?
So that would be separate from the video. So essentially, the way I like to describe kind of what is happening this year with the Native American Heritage Month celebration is similar to what we do for our Fall Fun Festival this year. So rather than doing a 5,000 person event or 3,000 person event that is, during COVID, kind of an area where there's some concern around safety and the health of participants, since it's our large group and there's no mask requirement. So there are some concerns there. So rather than having one large event, it's breaking it down into different subsections to where we can still disseminate the information and celebrate the culture to different areas of the public. So I think that's kind of the goal of these different avenues, is to get the information across, to celebrate the heritage, but in different ways, albeit smaller than a large festival, but could potentially collectively provide a similar impact. But yes, I didn't know if there was any further questions on that.
I just wanted to, I don't know a whole lot of background, so now that I'm learning myself, I'm glad we got it covered.
We'll definitely promote it, Commissioner Khan, through, I would hope, the city avenues, as we're promoting our new celebration of Native American Heritage Month for the city. So we will be directing people to visit that display at the San Gabriel Library.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Commissioner Godo and Commissioner Borja?
Yes, so I just want to say that Commissioner Godo did an excellent job in creating that survey. And in fact, it was me that was assisting her with it, but she did most of it, and she did a great job. I don't know if everyone had a chance to take a look at it, so that maybe we can consider just finishing that one up. Commissioner Godo, do you have anything that you wanted to add on regards to the survey that you created?
Sure. We met together, Commissioner Borja, so this was a team effort, and took a look at some of the information that is already being collected by the school district, and wanted to kind of focus this more along the lines of finding out from young people sort of what the most pressing issues they identify for this city. Our idea was to keep it as short as possible to ensure that, we get a good number of people who are willing to complete the survey. But as we were kind of going through it, it also occurred to us that this might be information that we want to collect from the entire community. So this is obviously just our first draft, our first run at it. And I know that Matthew also sent to us some additional survey samples that we can take a look at to see, if there's things that we want to borrow from some of the surveys that have already gone out. but we did kind of add at the end the demographic information in case this is something that, you know, we want to distribute widely. Then we can have people kind of take a look at the or answer the questions about their age range, and then separate out, you know, the young people's answers. And so we may need to connect with Commissioner Brenha on you know, some of the data collection to see if there's anything that's missing, so that maybe we can compile these into just one survey instead of trying to do two, one directed just to youth and one for the community. So we welcome anybody's feedback if you've had a chance to look at it. If not, this is obviously just a draft. And I think that's all. That's all we've got so far.
So I wanted to say, if, you know, just for our listening public who may not have gone through it, just quickly. So what I really like is that they tried to make a very, as Commissioner Goto said, very short survey that I hope would only take maybe 5 minutes, because I don't think people are going to give us much more than that. There are 2 open-ended questions, and then the other ones are all kind of multiple choice, but just to run through them quickly for people who are listening. The first is, are you aware of the HERE Commission? And I'm paraphrasing these. The second one is, what diversity, equity, and inclusion area is most important to you? And you choose 3. There are things like ageism, civic engagement, cultural wellness, environmental justice, housing justice, those kinds of areas. Number 3 is, what cultural events have you attended in the last 3 years in the city, to kind of get an idea of how involved people are in the city? And they name some. And for that one, I just might remove the word cultural, because I don't know if cultural applies to all of them. They're just kind of, what events have you attended in the city? Let's see, how do you get information about programs and activities? Because we're really trying to figure out how to communicate with people. What's the best way to reach you about events and activities in San Gabriel? So just information gathering. And then those demographic items that Commissioner Goto mentioned in terms of their age range, their ethnicity, if they would like to share that, and then their gender identity. So it's a really short, sweet survey that I think can collect some very valuable information. So thank you both so much for working on this. It's great. It's what we were asking for.
So I think the other thing that we'll take a look at is, I think that the surveys, the other sample surveys that were provided for some of the community services, it looks like it was a paper form. So I don't know if we want to talk more about whether or not, because our thought was, at least for the young people, that an online, you know, mobile app kind of platform would be the best. But if we do broaden this out to more of the community, then we may want to also have some sort of hard copy survey that people who are maybe not necessarily have access to, you know, online sources could also fill out. But we didn't know if that would also, you know, impact city resources in terms of, you know, compiling that data, and how much effort might need to go into that. So we can coordinate with Matthew and Rebecca to get some feedback on that issue as well.
Just some quick notes, if I may. So we pay for a service called SurveyMonkey, which is how we've done some of our more recent surveys in community services. And so the fantastic part about it is we do have the option to send a link off to community members. You have the option to create the QR code for, you know, we were all using them at restaurants during COVID. And then it will also analyze all of those results for us in a pretty chart form. It'll show you how many people responded, how many of each people responded with each answer. So it'll do all of that analysis for you. So I would say if we're targeting the youth that are more likely to be able to use this type of technology, that's going to eliminate a substantial amount of the staff time. and definitely a plus, but definitely could be a barrier when we're looking at the larger community, as well as the potential that they're non-English speakers or non-English readers. Commissioner
Yeah.
Bernal?
Yeah. I read through, there were some like summaries on the surveys that we had sent out in the past. And I mean, it sounded like we didn't get very many responses. Is that still true with like the Survey Monkey surveys? Or was there information on that as well?
Sorry,
And how many responses we got back?
Sure. So your question was about the amount of response received from the surveys?
Yeah.
So I was not with the city when the paper application came out or the paper survey came out. Our director, Rebecca Perez, would probably be able to give a better review on that.
Yeah, I can address that. Thank you, Matthew. So a couple of the different surveys that we had on there, one was for our Parks Master Plan. And we provided, there were a couple of different surveys provided for that. One was one that was mailed out, and I don't think Matthew sent you that one. That was actually pretty extensive, and it was very much connected to parks. The one that he included was an intercept survey that we actually did on with a shorter format, kind of more general questions that we connected with residents at some of our events and also at just meeting up with people in the parks. So there may not have been as many surveys received as were received with the mailed survey. And then the other was one that the city had done, I think maybe during the Measure SG effort. And then the other was a specific to an event. And so sometimes at events, we don't tend to get the same number of surveys that we would get if we were directly sending those to people. So I hope that provides a little more information.
I'm trying to read back through it because I think it was one that they said that they had like 4 different ways of like disseminating the survey. And they talked about like the different numbers of responses per like ways of sending it out. Was it that one? Okay, you did, Matthew?
Sorry. So what I included was the open space intercept survey, which was part of the Parks Master Plan that Rebecca was referring to. And then I also included some of the demographic results that came as a result from the intercept survey and then the main survey that was the lengthier survey that was provided through, I think, a paper medium as well. So the results that were provided and their nice graphics from the consultant agency, I believe, shows kind of the key results that I thought were more there was more results in the Parks, it's pages and pages of results from the Parks Master Plan, but that was relatable to the purpose of the HEAR Commission.
Okay, I was just wondering if you have information on the number of responses that we've gotten for, like, say, the Survey Monkey surveys that got like kind of emailed out or whatever to.
Sure. So the Survey Monkey surveys, it depends. We've done quite a few that are class specific. If they've taken our run, walk, and roll event, or if they've taken our dance classes, so we can get a better idea as a department as to how we can improve on those specific areas. And those tend to do a little bit better because it's directly targeted to the community that is directly participating in what we're interested in finding out about. We've noticed when it's a little bit broader, like at a large event, the results tend to be a little less robust as we would hope for. But I will say one of our staff, actually Danielle in our department, offered a very small incentive for those participants that turned back in their survey by a particular date. So that way we could get a better understanding as to what people were looking for in our services. and the results were like exponentially better. So it shows that if you dangle the carrot a little bit, you can get a little bit more responses, which I'm sure is typical kind of across the board when people are asking for people to take time out of their day to complete a survey.
This is Director Perez again. What may be helpful with the youth component would be for us to outreach to some of our local schools. So Jefferson Middle School, even some of the private schools, obviously Gabriel High School, and maybe connect with some of the clubs that are at those schools that might be able to distribute those. And I'm sure Commissioner Borja, with her connection with Gabriel, could even help identify what some of those groups might be. I think maybe sending that out to those direct clubs and kind of having those connections and knowing that they're going to be distributing them might be the most benefit to getting the information, rather than the HERE Commission or the city just trying to distribute that and trying to get public or youth input. That'd be my thought, that might be the best way to get that feedback that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And Commissioner Borja and I did discuss at least doing that outreach to the young people. And I think that this can be sort of an ongoing effort in terms of the wider community. I mean, we can obviously take a look at the data that's coming in. And one of the reasons why we stated in the survey itself that we're asking for the demographic information is we want to make sure that we are getting a good broad representation of the community. So if we find that we've got certain segments missing, then we can always direct our outreach in a more targeted way, I think, to other groups in the community. So hopefully this will be sort of an ongoing thing. I don't see it as something, I don't know, Matthew, you'd have to tell me if SurveyMonkey, I've used it before. I think it's a really easy platform. It's great. I don't know if we can have an extended window that it's available, or if it has to be a really tight amount of time that's available. But I think we could, possibly do some outreach in waves.
You can definitely have it available as long as you would need it.
Okay, great. So more to come on that. That's another work in progress. But as the commissioners read through the questions that we're proposing, if there's anything that you feel is missing, or we might need to make some changes or amendments, just please give us your feedback.
Thank you, Commissioner Godo and Commissioner Borja. And that's actually a nice segue into something else that they are going to spend a couple minutes, I hope, speaking about. And Commissioner Godo may have been saving this for her commissioner's report. But another area in terms of youth engagement was identifying youth liaisons for our HERE Commission. And Commissioner Godo did attend a virtual meeting for the Los Angeles County Youth Commission. And Matthew included in our agenda packet kind of an example of their application. So Commissioner Godo, maybe you can just update us on where we are in terms of the youth liaison application, or just an update for that.
We were focusing specifically on the survey. So at this time, we didn't really discuss the application yet. And I think that we do want to discuss a little bit more what form that's going to take, because I think if I recall correctly, the commission had expressed interest in maybe having ambassadors versus full commissioners, which I think is a little more time intensive in terms of the vetting and the application process. So I think that sort of the first steps would be to to have some ambassadors, 2 ambassadors of high school age. But if it's appropriate at this time, I can talk a little bit about the LA County Youth Commission meeting that I attended, and I think it's a little bit different from the application, which might have been looking more directly at public health. The LA County Youth Commission is Is it okay for me to go ahead and
probably go into the commissioner's report So I jumped the gun and put
No worries.
that in your lap right now. So now I'm taking it away, but we are going to move on so that we get to commissioners' reports. But I would love to really hear about what you have to say. So more to come in terms of, as you correctly called them, ambassadors that we're going to identify. But that is another area in terms of youth engagement. Accessibility, I think we discussed a little bit in terms of the city council approval of the translations. That was our biggest area for our work plan in terms of accessibility. Data collection, my understanding is we kind of put on hold because the data collection that we were referring to has to do with the police department, and that collection of information is going to start more in January. Matthew, is that correct? I think is what we said in January of 2022. But one area that we are missing was number one, which is, forget what item one is called, but it was our recommendation that city staff participate in some type of implicit bias training. And I know that Commissioner Fitzsimmons spoke with Chief Harris, who provided her with a binder, that's what he told me. I'm maybe putting her on the spot also today, but provided a binder of information with what they currently require of their police officers or police staff. Commissioner Fitzsimmons, I don't know if you have any other information you'd like to provide.
No, the binder was given to Matthew, and it is a complete binder that is used in the police academy for the young recruits. It is just kind of touching the surface of bias training, but it is a good beginning. And I don't know, Matthew, if you had a chance to look through it, but it's pretty extensive as far as the training programs. You know, if you want to dig deeper into the bias training, they can have like a 2-week training period. But this is just one that is just kind of pretty basic, so that if you're working with folks that are non-professional, if you're working with some of the city staff, if you're working with public works, it's something that they can understand easily. And that's what you want to do. If you're going to do a bias training, you want to have it so that everybody understands it, and it's not really too deep and too technical.
Thank you, Commissioner Fitzsimmons. So I would like to see this as another one of kind of moving up as we accomplish some of our items on the action plan, that we move this one up to make some recommendations to the city. Our action plan item, or our work plan item, was this recommendation, and we also offered to assist the city in any way that we could with making this happen. So maybe if we can provide the city with some resources, there's some that were attached to the agenda in terms of companies that can provide this, anything from a free service that's online to something in person that obviously would require a budget and usually several $1,000s. But if we can keep this in mind in terms of the action plan and making some recommendations to the city. Thank you. So is there any other discussion or anything that anyone else would like to bring up in terms of our annual work plan and progress that we're making, or where to go from here?
Yes, Chair Jennings, and yes, I wanted to share a meeting that I had with Jonathan Fu, just briefly. It won't take that long, if I may.
Does it have to do with the work plan?
Yeah, it has to do with community engagement and accessibility.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I had a meeting a couple of weeks back with Jonathan. He happens to be in the meeting today. So basically, he gave me a recap once again of what his role is within the public information that he works in, and the department he works in. He's basically a one-man band. He has some help from other folks, and he works closely together with the public information officer, which is Sergeant Rebecca Gomez. And also, he had also mentioned about an outreach effort that he had worked with when he was part of a different city. Of course, this was a bigger city, and they had resources, which brought up a really good point, or a really good brought a really good thought to me, and that's maybe creating an outreach volunteer-based outreach program, or not program, but just a coalition, or I don't know how to phrase that. Not anything that we're going to pay anybody, but just get a group of people that are willing to go out in the community. And this basically is going to tie into the survey that we're doing. I think the best thing is to go out there and knock at people's doors. I know that COVID is going on right now, and it's probably not the best time for that, but maybe in the future we might want to think about this and actually going door to door to have the survey completed. My only fear is that with the survey, first, that it's not translated, and I was going to ask that question to city staff. If it's going to be translated, in which languages is it going to be translated, and the associated cost for that. And then let me go back and digress a little bit. The outreach effort, I think a lot of people, if we're using SurveyMonkey, I'm sure we're missing people, and that's the main thing. That we should try to target these different pockets in the community. And how are we going to target them if it's only via social media or through the SurveyMonkey? We're gonna miss a lot of people that are not going to be represented. They're not going to understand. Maybe the SurveyMonkey is not in English. It's not in traditional Chinese or Spanish or Vietnamese or whatever other language that might be spoken in our city. So the best thing and the best effort that we could do is this outreach, boots on the ground effort to go and knock and help people with the survey. So now, if I have to go out there and do the survey myself, I would. And whoever wants to join me, I think we should work on something, volunteer coalition, so that we can get the actual concrete results, an actual concrete test sample. So with that said, this just goes back to the community engagement portion and the accessibility for all Sangerbillinos. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Herrera. Any additional comments?
If I may, Chair Jennings, briefly. So included in the packet as well that I sent over was a sample of what is included for the commissioner applications. So a screenshot of, I'm sure actually where all of you applied as well to become commissioners, as what could be a starting point for the youth liaison or youth ambassador, and as well as some questions that could be included as part of the application, such as what interests you most about the HEAR Commission? What do you hope to gain through participating in the HEAR Commission as a youth liaison? And are you currently active in school government or other related school activities? And then beyond that, I included some of the samples from other cities. They're not specifically youth liaisons, but maybe the youth commissions. And I think Temple City had a pretty extensive application and packet with a cover letter that kind of provided some additional information as to the role of the youth commissioner, as well as what they're looking for in the commissioner. So obviously that's not something that's typically included with any of the other commission packets or the commission applications, but it could be something for the commission to consider moving forward as you're developing the youth liaison or ambassador application.
Thank you. Any other input? So what I've kind of heard from everyone this evening in terms of going forward, our, I guess, next set of initiatives would be at our next meeting, another follow-up on our Native American Heritage Month, a follow-up on our youth survey, and please, if you have any input, provide that to Matthew to work with Commissioner Scotto and Commissioner Borja. Same thing for the Native American Heritage Month, please provide that to Matthew, also to provide to myself and Commissioner Khan. We're starting to think about our youth ambassador and creating a program there the implicit bias training, we also would like to make as part of our next round of our action plan. And then, as Vice Chair Herrera said, kind of continuing to work with our information officer to find ways to make sure that we are accessing as many people as we can around the survey, and then other items that we are rolling out. With our survey in particular, this first survey, we're concentrating on youth, which I think may have fewer of those limitations than when we try to survey the general population. I think more of our youth is going to be English speaking. At least that will be an option, even if it may not be their first language. They're tech savvy usually, so kind of going door to door or working with paper is going to be less of a we won't have that challenge, I think, as much with the youth. But certainly as we reach into the general population, we'll have to consider all of those areas. Anything else? Good, excellent. So moving on to our commission reports. Each commissioner may address the HERE Commission in public on matters of general information and or concern. This is also the time for commissioners to report on conferences and or meetings they have attended. Would anyone like to report? Commissioner Fitzsimmons?
Yes, I was hoping to have attended the Heritage Society meeting September 8th, but it was canceled due to they did not have an agenda meeting. But I did have an opportunity to speak with Matt Chang. He is on the commission, and I was asking him about if they had any input into the Native American population that is here, and he said no, they did not. On the website, San Gabriel website for the Heritage Commission, there is they did do a document. It's 161 pages, all about the history of the city of San Gabriel, and there was only one line that even addresses the Native American population. He said that really wasn't a priority for them. They were more interested in the buildings, the historical buildings here in the city and in the land. So I asked him, I said, well, what about the Heritage Museum? And he said, that is not owned by the city of San Gabriel. It's run by a different organization. But what I would like to see, and they were closed. I tried to get a hold of them, but I think they have different hours. I'll have to try maybe on the weekend or something if they're open. But what I would like to see is maybe with our Indian tribes, if we could get some artifacts and maybe have something put into that museum so that if people do visit, then they can see what the Indian tribes have, if they do any kind of beadwork, or if they have any kind of rugs that they have or something that would certainly show their heritage. I think it would be nice to have that. But it looks as though the land acknowledgement would dovetail into this, because you're looking more into the Native Americans, and the Heritage Society was doing more of the buildings, the heritage buildings. That's what they were more interested in. So I'm going to continue to try and get a hold of the museum and see if I can get some more information. But in talking with the tribes, the chief of the tribes, maybe we can get some artifacts to put into that museum and set up some kind of a display.
Thank you, Commissioner Fitzsimmons. So I just want to clarify, when you say the heritage, are you referring to the Historical Preservation Commission?
I'm sorry, the Historical Preservation.
I thought there was a separate organization. So the Historical Preservation, and I'm not even saying the Historical Preservation, and Matthew, can you give me the rest, please?
Sure. Historical Preservation and now you got me. Historical Preservation Arts Commission.
Right. So the historical content statement I think you were referring to, that you spoke to Mr. Chang about, actually has an entire at least one page that now refers to and references the native populations that were here when the Spanish arrived. I don't know if that was a fairly recent addition to that contact statement, and maybe he's unaware, but it is something that we are using as we develop our land acknowledgement statement. So it is available on the website.
Right, it is probably new because the item that he was referring to was something that was already published. And he said there was only like one line item, and I was reading through. I didn't read the whole 161 pages of this form, but he said that they weren't really looking into anything as far as the Native American tribes. Now this may have changed because I know that they were looking into this, so this might be a newer document that they have.
Right.
That maybe he didn't share with me on that.
The newest document, because my understanding is it has undergone several revisions over probably a few years, I want to say. And so the latest revision that is on, or the draft that is available for comment and for review, does certainly address the Native and Indigenous people who were here in this area. So I would encourage people to read it. That is a great idea about our local museum, and one that we spoke with Chief Morales about. So hopefully we will at some point in the future be looking at exhibits that we work with the mission and with our local tribal leaders to obtain, artifacts, information, or something to put together an exhibit that could be housed or displayed at our local museum, the Ramona.
Right, exactly. And I have one question for Mark. Mark, what's going on with the Boston market?
Thank you, Commissioner Fitzsimmons. We think that will be open here in October. I think they received the final approvals they were looking for from the health department, if I remember right. And so they're sort of gathering the rest of the things for their tenants and expect to be open here by the end of October.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Fitzsimmons. Commissioner Goto.
Thank you. I have 3 items and I'm going to try and be brief. So the first that we were talking about earlier was I was able to attend virtually the historic first meeting of the LA County Youth Commission, which happened last week. It includes 15 youth commissioners who all have personal experience with the juvenile justice, child welfare, and foster care systems. And they are tasked with providing input and recommendations to the LA County Board of Supervisors and to county departments that provide youth services, and developing strategic partnerships with youth, community-based organizations, and the private sector to improve outcomes for vulnerable young people within Los Angeles County. And their key goals are to develop an annual report card for county departments, to engage K through 12 youth, and to select 3 policies each year to study and make recommendations. And I think their motto says it all: nothing about us without us. There are 2 commissioners from District 1, which is the City of San Gabriel's district. Their names are Alex Furtado and Flo Valenzuela, and a full list is available on a press release that I received, but also they're soon to be launching their website. So it was a great meeting, really engaged young people. We'll look forward to seeing what they come up with. And the second item, if I can, I'd like to highlight is an exhibit at the Japanese American National Museum that I had the honor of attending recently, entitled "A Life in Pieces: The Diary and Letters of Stanley Hayami," that will be presented at the museum through January 2nd of next year. And Stanley was a typical 16-year-old who wanted to be a writer and artist, and was a resident of San Gabriel, attending Mark Keppel High School in Alhambra in 1942 when the war broke out. And he and his family were incarcerated by the United States government and sent to an internment camp in Hart Mountain in Wyoming. He kept a diary of his time in camp that included drawings and paintings that depicted life, what life was like for him and the 120,000 Japanese Americans who were incarcerated under Executive Order 9066. When he turned 18, Stanley enlisted in the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, the segregated all Japanese American unit that became one of the most highly decorated in US history. And on April 23rd, 1945, just after the war was officially over, he was killed in action at age 19 in Italy while he was trying to rescue fellow soldiers. His mother received his Bronze Star and Purple Heart while she was still incarcerated at Heart Mountain. So his notebooks and drawings and letters were donated to the Japanese American National Museum by his family, and they're a powerful reminder that our democracy is fragile. And I would encourage everyone to visit the museum, which is located in Little Tokyo in downtown LA, to see the exhibit. It has a virtual reality film of Stanley's life. It has activity booklets for students. And one of the booklets includes a painting called Remembering, which is a drawing of his home in San Gabriel and also his barracks at Heart Mountain. You can find more information and explore the exhibit on the museum's website, which is www.janm.org. And maybe we can include information in the next City Beat newsletter about the exhibit as well. It's definitely historical and very moving. And the final item I'd like to announce also is that the Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival is presented by Visual Communications, is currently underway through this Saturday, October 2nd, has a wide variety of films that are being screened also in downtown LA. And there are free programs as well as ticketed screenings and talkbacks with filmmakers and actors. And you can find the festival schedule on the Visual Communications website, which is vcmedia.org. So thanks, those are mine.
Thank you, Commissioner Goto. Commissioner Borja.
Yes, thank you, Chair Jennings. I wanted to report I attended a webinar put on by the University of Redlands on critical race theory. That's a real big hot button if you haven't heard yet. And so it was a lot of professors discussing what critical race theory is. And if I can, I took some notes and I just wanted to read a little bit through about what it was. So really quickly, the American Bar Association, the critical race theory, right? It grew from the critical legal studies, which argued that the law was not objective or apolitical. Like proponents of the critical legal studies, critical race theorists recognized that the law could be complicit in maintaining an unjust social order. Where critical race theorists departed from CLS was in the recognition of how race and racial inequality were reproduced through the law. So in understanding the critical race theory, according to Kimberly Crenshaw, the CRT is a way to talk openly about how America's history has had an effect on our society and institutions today. And this is quoting her. We need to pay attention to what has happened in this country and how what has happened is continuing to create differential outcomes so that we can become the democratic republic we say we are. We believe in the promises of equality, and we know we can get there if we confront and talk honestly about inequality, end quote. So it's not just about Black versus white, which I think a lot of the media is portraying, like us versus them. It's about internment camps. It's about immigration, education, land grants, prison systems. Critical race theory in education involves teaching in a democratic society means teaching the truth. Teaching the truth requires teaching the contradictions. Teaching the contradictions requires teaching through discomfort. Teaching and learning requires seeing the bigger picture. Critical race theory is a research and advocacy. It's a movement. For example, schools are segregated by income. With CRT, how do we acknowledge or bring awareness, and how do we address equity? by examining suspension, expulsion rates, low enrollment in AP honors courses, high enrollment in special education. An example would be, for example, the latest with the Varsity Blues operation and the backdoor for wealthy parents at highly selective institutions paying their way into colleges. There's also disability. So they were talking about disability crit, Asian crit, Latinx crit, Black crit, or they have tribal crit as well. But disability crit is how race and disability plays in society in the classrooms, how special education classrooms have an overrepresentation of students of color. Critical race theory is making national news headlines, and the three pioneers of this academic discipline are Columbia law professors Kimberly Crenshaw, Kendall Thomas, and Patricia Williams. I really encourage you to take a look at what critical race theory is. You can Google it, check it on YouTube. There was a short video, I believe, by UC Berkeley professor in talking about what critical race theory is versus what racism and teaching critical thinking is. It's quite different. The other thing I want to point out is University of Redlands. I think they're going to be putting on October 27th, delving into ethnic studies. So it was a very interesting topic. I will go ahead and once I get that link of when that is, I'll send that to Matthew Morales so he can share out. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Borja. And I attended that meeting also. It was hard to tell who was on the meeting. So I really appreciate you passing on information. And as you said, I guess my take home from that meeting was that most of what is being fought are people are upset about in terms of critical race theory really has nothing to do with what critical race theory really is and kind of how it came to be. So it is important that we all obtain our own firsthand information and education as opposed to always relying on secondhand, sometimes very false information before we become very passionate about opposing something. So thank you, Commissioner Borja, I appreciate that. Any other reports? Good, thank you. So I will just end by again saying I kind of referred to it and our city council did read a proclamation, but this is Hispanic Heritage Month. It begins September 15th and goes through October 15th. So there are many, many ways, obviously, to learn more about Hispanic heritage, Latinx heritage in the United States. I love the Smithsonian because they have a museum that celebrates lots, of different groups, and so they're usually a very good resource. Here in LA, usually at Olvera Street, it would be a wonderful place to go and celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, but I know that a lot has really kind of shut down there because of COVID, but on the weekends, my understanding is things are starting to, liven up. And so if you have time, please check the websites, Google Hispanic Heritage Month celebrations in our area until October 15th. So next, staff comments. I'm sorry, staff members have the opportunity to address the commission and public on matters of general information and or concern. Do we have any staff comments tonight?
It doesn't look like we have any staff comments tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. If there isn't anything additional, then we will adjourn our meeting at 10:45. We will adjourn. The next regular HERE Commission meeting will be held on Tuesday, October 26, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. Information regarding matters to be considered at each meeting will be available on the Friday before the HERE Commission on the city's website at www.sangabrielcity.com. This regular meeting is now adjourned at 10:46. Thank you, everyone.
I thought the time was 8:46.
Yes, 8:46. But
I'm sorry, I'm in Houston, Texas.
oh, you're in Texas. Oh, that makes sense. I was like, oh, it just started at 8:30.
That's why everybody was so quiet. Okay, this regular meeting is now adjourned.
Yes, we started at 6 6 something, not 8 something.
We're
You're following the central time.
8:46 p.m.